Everyone is raving about Blue-Eyed Samurai. My wife and I started it last night, finished it today. We binged through the whole thing. Overall, it was a really good show, but it definitely has some issues, and I think some of it's being overlooked because it's animated. When you go with animation, even though this is heavily CGI, you get these really stylized action scenes, and I think it makes people much more forgiving. You see this a lot with anime where logistics come into question and people are like, oh, it's just the style, and you can kind of hide behind that. The character work in this show is great. Mizu, the main character, has a really good backstory. I like her arc a lot, even though it's only part way complete, it looks like. Akemi, I did not like. She was my least favorite part of the show. I like the idea of what they wanted to do with her, but I thought her character was just kind of cringy, especially near the end. Taigen seemed to have a pretty good arc, although his also only seems to be part way, but he made some pretty big steps. And then we had a good character like Ringo, who's kind of the comic relief, lighten the mood guy. He's a bit slow, but he's really reliable and just a nice guy. And then we have a bunch of pretty mixed bag of characters. The biggest issue overall for me is that there's definitely some plot armor moments in the show. And this is what I was referring to when I said I think people kind of overlook it because it's animation. There's quite a few times where I'm like, probably shouldn't have survived there, or lucky she didn't get killed there, that type of thing. And it's stuff that keeps her alive. It's not like minor stuff. It doesn't ruin the story or anything because the character work is really good and the overall ideas and stuff are good. But, definitely some contrivances and conveniences and plot armor and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to quickly go through the main plot and talk about what I liked and didn't like. Mizu is the main character. She's the blue-eyed samurai. Everyone thinks she's a dude. She's mixed race. The show is set in the 1600s in Japan, where they became completely isolationist. So there's only 4 white people in all of Japan, supposedly. One of them raped her mother, and she was born. Her mother is presumed dead. That's the basis for her whole revenge and her motivation and everything. And we see throughout the story why she's so angry and such a loner and so pissed off all the time. And they really put the work in to make you feel like she should be as pissed off as she is. Her main goal the whole time is to find the white guy who's bringing guns into the country. And it ends up being Abijah Fowler. He's a total piece of shit. She's going after him. That's like the big arc for the whole thing. And then she runs into a bunch of little things along the way. Early on, she fights Taigen at a dojo. She doesn't kill him, but she dishonors him. And he loses his engagement to the princess of Kyoto, who is Akemi. So Akemi, after this, gets married off to the shogun's son, who's thought to be cruel. We don't really see him until the last couple episodes. I like the idea of Akemi's arc, but she kind of gets on my nerves. So her whole thing is she's like a bird in a cage, and she has a bird in a cage the whole time. And you get the parallel. And she wants a say in her life. The part of her arc that's pretty traditional is she has the guy that she wants to marry, and then she has the guy that she's supposed to marry for political and familial reasons in this era. Obviously, we're talking about 1600s Japan. There's arranged marriages and all that kind of stuff to consider. And she's nobility or royalty. Taigen goes after Mizu because she beat him. He wants a rematch for their duel to the death to get his honor back and to get Akemi back. And I like Taigen's arc because at the very beginning, he's focused only on his honor, and you can tell he's really pissed off that he lost. He was undefeated. And over the course of the story, he realizes that honor, in some capacity, is worthless. And what he really wants is just to be happy. And this is kind of the climax for him at the end of the season. He ends up really appreciating Mizu because they had to help each other out a few times. And he just wants to be with Akemi. Akemi's arc is she wants freedom, and she's kind of willing to do anything it takes to get it. At the end of the story, when she's with the shogun's son, she gets a taste of power. And what she decides is that she wants power. So she's going to be kind of the future antagonist. And you can see this coming pretty early on, I think. I guessed that that's where it was going in like episode 4. Because she's just too impulsive and she's making too many decisions throughout the show that seem like it's going that direction. The reason I find her arc kind of annoying is because her arc really focuses on sexism. And that's fine. The writers of the show created a show where you can have pretty open sexism and it makes sense in the story. So it's not a huge deal. Like, I wouldn't call it like culture war motivated or anything, but it's also very on the nose. And one of the things that this show does, and this is something I've complained about in many shows, is where you have like the older mentor character who says, this is how things are, blah, blah, blah. And then the younger character who's like, no, I want to change things. This is how they should be. And they battle back and forth. And it's really common in media now that at some point the older person concedes to the younger person that they were wrong the whole time, even though there's no reason for them to believe that at any point in the story. And this is the dynamic between Akemi and Seki. Seki is the second in command, essentially, of her father, who runs Kyoto. And Seki the entire time is like, look, life gives us choices. There are certain paths that we can take. You have to pick one. You can't change how things really are just because you want them to be a different way. And partway through the story, it seems like that's the lesson that she's going to learn. But then eventually she's like, no, I want them to be this way. And then she starts making a bunch of pretty bad decisions, but then gets rewarded for it in the end. And this whole thing where the younger person was right all along, and to me, it's one of those things that just seeps into stories where younger people don't like older people and their ideas and traditions and history, and they think it's all bad. They want to manifest that in a show or movie or whatever, with a younger character being able to say, I told you so to an older character. So I kind of don't like that dynamic because at the end, Seki says that he was wrong and then gets shot. So he dies believing that he was wrong for this girl that he raised. And I just don't like that perspective very much. Whether it fits in the story and character, it kind of does. It feels a little bit forced to me because I don't think there would be a situation where she would ever really have the kind of power that I think she's going to have later in the show. And to be clear, the show does say she needs to get her power through manipulating the Shogun's son, not just take it for herself and become empress or anything. But it just feels like it's all a bit on the nose, I guess. And she has some really cringy dialogue too, where the madam of this brothel that she goes to at one point tells her that she needs to decide what to do with her own fucking life. And later on, she's done something and she's talking to her again. And she's like, I've decided what I want to do with my own fucking life. And it's just one of those things that it feels like it's something you would say in 2023, but it's taking place in the 1600s in Japan. There's just a few weird lines like that just feel too out of place for me with her character that I think makes her kind of cringy. But Mizu is great. Mizu is treated as a demon from childhood, literally all the way throughout the story, and I don't think that's going to change at any point. Mizu, because of her blue eyes, she gets called an onryo, which I have an image up on screen. You can see I literally just Google imaged it because I'm not familiar with Japanese mythology or folklore. And it's interesting because she actually kind of does look like that at different points. Obviously, this is a much more distorted version, but you know, she has like the solid outfit and the blue eyes and blood all over, so she does look demonic. And the mythology, at least from a minimal Google search, is that they are believed to cause disasters and kill people, and they're ghosts that can interact with our world, and they suck the souls of dying people as like a last act of revenge. And there's a bunch of images that are pretty similar to this. I just picked this one because it looks pretty cool. And her whole backstory is just fucked. Like every person in her life just fucked her over. So she was born, obviously an orphan. A white guy had her through rape with her mom. Her mom is presumably dead. She ended up going to the sword master, who's a blind blacksmith, and he raised her as a boy because she hid that she's a girl from a young age because women in this world are limited. And throughout the whole show, almost everyone thinks that she's a man, all the way to the end. But most people won't even talk to her because they call her a demon. She has blue eyes. And later on, you find out that she had a husband, and the woman who was actually taking care of her as a kid was her mom's maid. And she survived the fire that thought killed her. And then later off, they tried to sell her off because she's still a demon. A whole bunch of stuff happens. It's really fucked up. But it gives you a good perspective on why she's so angry and just such a loner, no matter what, even when people are nice to her. So I really like her development. She does learn that she's going to have to open up at least a little bit by the end of the show, which is good. And most of that is thanks to Ringo. And Ringo is a guy with no hands who's a little bit slow. He's kind of like a Hodor type character, but he's very helpful and he definitely lightens the mood of the show and he's pretty funny. My main issues with the show are that I find Akemi annoying just in general, and I kind of wonder if she's a bit on the nose and that's supposed to be more of a modern day commentary, even though it makes sense in the story. But a lot of the action scenes are really cool and well done, but I think the flaws are getting overlooked because it's animated. So pretty early on, she's fighting 4 guys at once, and she falls off a cliff a pretty good distance and lands upside down one-handed on a rock and just holds her body there. And we saw her doing this training, but still, that's, it's pretty ridiculous to fall that far and catch yourself on one hand. And then you have stuff where she takes off her ankle and wrist weights, and then she's faster. Obviously, they had to do something to try to make it to where she's faster, but then you also have to account for the fact that she's fighting all these men and killing them weighted down, which seems like a bit of a stretch. One really cool thing they do with her ankle and wrist weights, though, is at one point, she turns her sword into a very long weapon by adding the weights to the handle of her katana. And that's a really neat thing. I really like that kind of detail and way to use different resources that she has and change her fighting style and all that. So that was really cool. You'll see this quite a bit throughout the show. At one point, she's fighting these guys with like Wolverine-style knives on their hands, and one of them comes up and grabs her throat instead of just slashing her. Later on in that fight, she's surrounded by like 100 of them, and they have her pinned under a door, and no one just stabs her. And she ends up getting out from under the door and killing like all of them. So, like that kind of stuff is a bit much. There's a part, I think it's episode 6. She's jumping across these traps in a castle, and she doesn't have her sword because she had to use it to stab into the wall and then swing forward. So she's backed up to a spike pit, and it's just this open hallway where you can fit 5 or 6 guys wide, and they all have swords, and there's like 30 of them, and she kills all of them with no weapon. And to me, that kind of thing is like, it looks really cool because they do this circular camera, one long shot deal for parts of it, but it's one of those things that's like, okay, she's essentially a god. And maybe the worst one of the whole show is at the end of this episode, she knocks Tegan through a window, catches her sword in the side of like a vertical wall, grabs Tegan with her other hand, puts him up around her neck, and then climbs up the vertical wall with both of their body weights when she has a hole in her foot because she got stabbed through it. At some point, it's like, she's getting beat to shit, which is good because you want to see your character take damage and be in danger. But on the other side of that, it's like, if the stakes keep getting more and more crazy and she just keeps living, then you have to keep escalating or she never feels like she's in danger. And then also in this part, her and Tegan fall through the ice together. She's about to drown, and Ringo just shows up out of nowhere to save her, which is a super convenient plot contrivance. Because she had apologized to him, but he wasn't with her. So we have no idea how he got to this island, how he knew where she was. He showed up right as she was about to drown with Tegan. So a lot there is really convenient to keep her alive. And another thing that I thought was really strange, in the finale, she throws a candle in front of a doorway in the Shogun's mansion house. And obviously everything's bamboo and wood and shit because it's 1600s Japan. So that house ends up burning down, which makes total sense. But then literally the entire city of Edo burns down from that one candle. And it's like, if one candle can burn down the city, how is it not burnt down perpetually? So that to me just seemed like a bit of a reach. And then there's a line in there that I really don't like. I'm leaving this part for last because I hate bringing in meta stuff. But I read a couple interviews from the writers of this show, and the writers are husband and wife. And Amber Noizumi is the woman. She's mixed, Japanese and white. And she pretty much says that this is like a self-insert character on a fantasy level, which self-insert's not bad. It's a good story. It doesn't affect anything. But when you have lines like the one I'm about to say from Abijah Fowler, who's the only white guy in the show, it kind of makes me wonder if it's going to get worse in the following seasons. Abijah says to Mizu, "The biggest city in Japan has burned down as a blood sacrifice for your revenge. That must be the white in you. Maybe you are mine." And that's a line that, like, I don't know. Obviously, a lot of the show is about race and mixed race people and whatever. But for a white guy to say that burning down cities is very white, it's hard for me to give the benefit of the doubt to Netflix or Hollywood with things being the way that they are. So, we'll see. Between Akemi's character, which I thought was kind of cringy near the end, and that line from Abijah, I do wonder if season 2 is going to really get worse with the meta stuff seeping in and kind of fucking up the story. This season ends on a cliffhanger where she's going to London. So next season, she's going to be in London, presumably. She'll be the only mixed race Japanese person. And I'm assuming there's going to be all kinds of racism again because she's mixed race, which fits into the story. But you do have to wonder, will it be well written? Will it be on the nose? How far will they take it? So I thought this season was very good overall. Besides the plot armor and a couple contrivances, you do have to wonder if it's going to get worse. Because when you get a show that's this popular, and they're going to be, hey, crank that second season out, you might get more studio involvement and all that type of stuff. You just don't know. But yeah, overall, definitely a good show. My wife and I binged the whole thing in a day. So go check it out if you haven't. If you've seen it, let me know what you think. I'll try to respond as always. Like and subscribe and all that shit. That's it for me for this one. Thanks. See ya.